Thursday, 6:47 a.m. I was lacing up my work boots on the front porch, coffee going cold on the railing beside me, when my next-door neighbor Sandra, a retired schoolteacher who had lived on our street for 31 years, stepped out of her front door and stopped dead when she saw me. She didn't wave, didn't smile. She just stood there in her housecoat, holding her newspaper, staring at me like she was trying to decide something. I called over to her. "Morning, Sandra." She crossed her lawn slowly, glancing back at the street, then at my house, then at me. When she got close enough that she didn't have to raise her voice, she pressed her lips together and said, "I've been trying to find the right time to say something to you for about 6 weeks now. I kept telling myself it wasn't my business." She paused. "But I couldn't look at you anymore without saying it." I set down my coffee. "Say what?" She looked me in the eye. "When you leave for your early shifts, someone comes to your house. A man. He parks 2 streets over and walks. He's there by 7:15 most mornings, sometimes earlier. He stays for hours. Your wife lets him in through the back door." She swallowed. "This has been going on since at least September." I didn't move. "I know his car," she added. "A silver Audi. I've seen it parked on Mercer twice when I walk my dog." I wrote down the plate. She pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. "I'm sorry. I truly am." She went back inside, before I could say a single word. I stood on my porch holding that piece of paper, the morning cold against my face, listening to the birds like nothing in the world had just changed. Then I unfolded it, looked at the plate number, and folded it back up. I didn't go inside. I walked to my truck, started the engine, and sat there for a long moment before I pulled out of the driveway. I showed up to my shift at the distribution center and moved through the next 8 hours like a machine. Boxes, pallets, manifests. I didn't speak unless spoken to. My supervisor asked if I was feeling okay. I told him I hadn't slept well. He nodded and left me alone. What was happening behind my eyes was something else entirely. My wife and I had been together for 4 years, married for 2. We'd met at a mutual friend's cookout in the summer, dated for almost 18 months before I proposed. She was warm, funny, sharp. She had a laugh that made other people in the room laugh just from hearing it. I had loved her in the way you love something you never quite believe you deserve. I thought about the last few months, the way she'd started going to bed earlier when I had a night shift coming up, the new gym bag by the door that she never seemed to take to an actual gym, the way she'd laugh at something on her phone and tilt the screen away when I walked into the room. Individually, none of it meant anything. Together, now, it was a complete picture. I ran the license plate that afternoon through a guy I knew who worked at the DMV office 2 towns over. He owed me a favor from a long time ago and didn't ask questions. I texted him the number. He texted back a name 40 minutes later. I read the name twice. Then I put my phone face down on the seat and drove home in silence. The name was my brother-in-law. My wife's younger brother. The person who had stood at our wedding wearing a charcoal suit, grinning in every photograph, clapping me on the back and saying, "Welcome to the family, man." For real. The person I had helped move twice, lent money to once without asking for it back. Covered for when he told his parents he was in Denver for work and was actually in Vegas losing money he didn't have. The person my wife had always described as her best friend growing up. Her protector. Her person. He had been parking 2 streets over and walking to my back door before 7 in the morning while I was pulling 10-hour shifts loading freight. I did not sleep that night. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 14 months, waited until my wife left for her job, and then spent 3 hours installing 2 small wireless cameras, one in the living room facing the back door, one in the hallway. They cost me $212 at the electronics store on Route 9. I set them up to feed to an app on my phone. I tested both angles. Clear as daylight. Then I sat in my truck down the block and waited. At Shu, Nioe, M. A silver Audi rolled slowly past the end of our street and disappeared around the corner. At 7:22, my back door opened. I watched it on my phone screen. My wife, still in pajamas, pulling the door open, smiling before the person even stepped inside. A hug that lasted too long to be anything other than what it was. His hand on her lower back. Her head against his shoulder. I put my phone in my glove box and drove to a diner on the highway and ordered eggs I couldn't eat. I sat in that booth for an hour staring at the parking lot. An old man 2 tables over was doing a crossword puzzle. The waitress refilled his coffee without him asking. The ceiling fans turned slowly overhead. Everything was calm and ordinary and completely removed from the thing that was sitting on my chest like a cinder block. I paid my bill and left. What I felt, I want to be honest about it, wasn't the explosion I always assumed something like this would be. It wasn't rage, not right away. It was something quieter and more specific. It was the feeling of a version of your life dissolving. Like watching a photograph fade, you can see exactly what it used to be, and you can see it going, and there is nothing to grab onto. I drove around for a while. Then I started thinking clearly. I called my attorney that afternoon. Not a divorce attorney, not yet my general attorney, a woman I'd used twice before for contract work. I told her I needed to understand what I was entitled to before I made any moves. She asked a few questions and told me to come in at 4 o'clock. I spent 2 hours in her office. I left with a clear understanding of what was mine, what was jointly held, what I needed to document, and what order to do things in. She was direct and practical and did not offer me sympathy, which was exactly what I needed. That evening I came home and made dinner. My wife came home at 6:30, kissed me on the cheek, asked what I was making. I said pasta. She said great, she was starving. We ate at the kitchen table. She told me about a difficult client at work. I listened. I asked follow-up questions. I poured her a second glass of wine when her glass got low. She had no idea. Over the next 10 days, I was methodical. I pulled 3 months of bank statements and photographed every one. I transferred a portion of our joint savings into a personal account, not all of it, just enough to secure what I needed. I contacted our insurance broker separately and quietly shifted my individual policy. I documented the footage from both cameras on 3 different storage locations, time-stamped and labeled. Every morning I watched the app. Not because I needed more evidence. I had enough on day 1. I watched because I needed to be absolutely certain that I did not act until I was ready, and watching it kept the anger cold instead of hot. Cold was more useful. On the 11th day, I drove to my in-laws' house on a Sunday afternoon. My father-in-law was in the garage working on something. My mother-in-law was inside. I asked to speak to my father-in-law alone. He's a blunt, fair-minded man who spent 20 years as a machinist and doesn't talk more than he needs to. We had always gotten along well. I showed him 2 clips on my phone. I didn't say anything while he watched. His face went through several things in about 45 seconds. When he was done, he handed my phone back to me and looked at the garage floor for a long time. "How long have you known?" he asked finally. "About 2 weeks. Have you talked to her?" "Not yet. I'm handling some things first." He nodded slowly. He asked me what I needed from him. I told him nothing. I just thought he deserved to know before it became a wider situation. He stood up, walked to the far end of his garage, and didn't say anything else for a full minute. Then he turned around and said, "I'm sorry, son. Whatever I can do." I drove home feeling something I hadn't expected. Not better, exactly, but less alone. The following Friday, I booked a weekend away by myself. I told my wife I needed to visit a former coworker in Pittsburgh who was dealing with a health situation. She said, "Of course, go, take care of him." She hugged me at the door. I looked at her face when she pulled back. Clear eyes. Easy smile. No hesitation whatsoever. I drove 40 minutes to a roadside motel, checked in under my name, and opened my laptop. That night I watched the full footage from both cameras. I am not going to describe what I saw in detail because the details are not the point. The point is that I watched it with the sound of the highway outside and the hum of the motel ice machine in the hallway, and I let myself feel all of it without looking away. I gave myself that one night to feel whatever I needed to feel. In the morning I showered, got dressed, drove to a McDonald's, ordered a large coffee, and sat in the parking lot finishing the draft of an email I had been working on for 11 days. The email was addressed to my wife's employer. She was an office manager at a mid-sized logistics company, and her brother had been recently brought on as a contractor through a referral she had personally written for him. It detailed a pattern of conduct that represented a clear conflict of interest and raised questions about the integrity of the referral. I attached documentation. I did not include my name. I sent it from a secondary email address I had created for this specific purpose. I drove home Saturday afternoon. My wife was on the couch watching television. She asked how my friend was doing. I said he was holding up. She said that was good. I sat down beside her and watched the rest of the movie she had on. I was careful for the next week. I did not change my behavior. I did not become cold or distant, because cold and distant would have told her something was wrong and given her time to prepare. I continued to be the same person I had been. I went to work, came home, made plans for a dinner with friends next month, asked about her week. I was present and ordinary and completely elsewhere. 4 days after I sent the email, her brother called her while I was in the kitchen. I heard her voice shift. Short answers. Then silence. Then she came into the kitchen with her phone at her side and said her brother was having some trouble at work. Something about a complaint. She looked at me when she said it. I looked back. "That's awful," I said. "What kind of complaint?" She shook her head. "He doesn't really know yet. They won't tell him much." I hope it works out for him, I said, and went back to what I was cooking. She stood there for another second before she went back to the other room. The following Tuesday, I came home from work and she was quieter than usual. We ate dinner. Afterwards, she said she wanted to talk. I said okay. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where we had eaten 100 ordinary meals, and she told me she had been going through something difficult for the past several months, something she hadn't known how to bring up, something she was ashamed of. She looked at her hands when she spoke. She said she had made a terrible mistake. That things had happened that she never planned for. That she had been trying to figure out how to tell me and she'd been too afraid and she was sorry. I listened to all of it without interrupting. When she was done, I asked her one question. How long? She closed her eyes. 8 months. I nodded. Please say something, she said. I stood up, went to the bedroom, and came back with a manila folder. I set it on the table between us. She looked at it without touching it. What is this? Open it. She opened it. Inside were printed screenshots, timestamped footage captures, the bank transfer records, the insurance documents already processed. On top of all of it, a single page from my attorney with specific language about what came next. She went very still. I've known for almost a month, I said. I didn't say anything because I needed to take care of a few things first. She looked up from the folder. Marcus, I don't want to have the conversation where you explain it, I said. I've seen enough to understand everything I need to understand. Please. Her voice broke on the word. Please, we can fix this. I will do whatever you need. I will end it completely. It's already over, I swear to you. It's not about whether it's over, I said. You let him into our home. For 8 months. I worked nights so we could build something, and you used those nights to do this. I paused. Not with a stranger. With your brother. She flinched like I had said something physical. I'm not angry. I told her, and I meant it by then. I was. But I've had time to move past angry into something clearer. I tapped the folder. My attorney will be in touch with yours next week. The division is straightforward. I've already documented everything, so there's nothing to dispute. I stood up from the table. I'd like you to stay at your parents' house tonight. I spoke to your father already. He knows. Her face changed when I said that. Something collapsed in it. He knows? She whispered. I felt he had the right to. She sat there with her hands flat on the table for a long moment. Then she said, quietly, I didn't think you were capable of this. Of being this cold. I picked up my keys from the counter. I learned it from watching you. I went and stayed at a friend's place that night. When I got back the next morning, her car was gone and she'd taken 2 bags from the closet. I stood in the bedroom doorway for a moment. Then I walked through the house opening windows. The air had been stale for months. I hadn't noticed until right then. I won't pretend the weeks after that were easy. They weren't. There are nights when you reach for a presence that used to be there and find nothing, and the nothing is its own specific kind of pain. There are mornings when the house is too quiet, and you stand in the kitchen making coffee alone and the whole thing hits you at once, not the betrayal, but the loss. The loss of what you believed you had. The years you can't get back. The future that existed only in your own mind. But there are other things too. There's the morning you wake up and realize you haven't been lied to in 3 weeks. There's the particular piece of a home that is yours without exception. There's the moment your father-in-law texts you and says he's proud of how you handled yourself, and you know he means it because he is not a man who says things he doesn't mean. Her brother's contract was terminated. The circumstances were described internally as a conflict of interest matter. He didn't know who had filed the complaint and never would. I had no interest in confronting him. I had no interest in a scene. The thing about a slow and methodical response is that it doesn't need a dramatic ending. It's already complete by the time anything visible happens. My attorney finalized the paperwork in 11 weeks. Clean split. No court battle, no extended back and forth. She had signed quickly, which told me she knew she had no ground to fight on. We were done on a Wednesday afternoon with no ceremony whatsoever. I drove home after. Made dinner. Watched television. Went to bed at a reasonable hour. Sandra waved to me from her yard the next morning when I left for work. I waved back. Neither of us said anything. There was nothing to say. I had been living inside a lie for 8 months without knowing it. And once you understand that, truly understand it, not just as a fact but as a thing you've processed all the way through, you find that you are not as broken as you expected to be. The lie was never you. It was something constructed around you by someone else. When you remove it, what's left is still you. Still intact. Still standing. People ask how you move forward from something like that. They want a roadmap. They want steps. I don't have steps. What I have is this: you take your time before you act. You secure what is yours. You stay calm when everything in you wants to stop being calm. You use the anger as fuel for the work and you don't let it make you sloppy or loud or obvious. And when it's done, you don't look back and wish you'd done it differently. I trusted the wrong person with the most important parts of my life. That's true. But I also trusted myself when it mattered most, moved carefully, and came out the other side without losing anything that was actually mine to keep. I'm Marcus. I'm 31 years old. I work early mornings and I come home to a quiet house and I sleep well at night. That's enough. For now, that is more than enough.